K2 has no real name, only an index from a British map, and a nickname given to it by those who came back, the Savage Mountain, the second highest peak on the planet, and the first in the number of people it takes for every 100 who reach the top, 9.5%, 1 in 10. And before the year 2000, 1 in 4. At 8,200 meters above sea level, the route passes through a narrow gully beneath a 100-meter ice serac that collapses without warning. This is the only way up, and the only way back. On the 1st of August, 2008, 18 people entered that gully. 7 came back. Now we are going to walk the entire route, from base camp to the summit and back, and see why K2 is called the most dangerous mountain on Earth. 8,611 meters. K2 is the second highest mountain on Earth, and the first by the number of people it has taken for every 100 who reached its top. It stands in the Karakoram Range, on the border between Pakistan and China, and it has no real name. K2 is an index from a British topographical survey of 1856. The letter K stands for Karakoram, and the number 2 is simply the order in which this summit was marked on the map. The local people never gave it a name, because they cannot see it from their valleys. The mountain is hidden behind other ridges, invisible from below, and those who do reach it usually already know exactly why they came. In 1953, the American climber George Bell, returning from a failed expedition, said, "It's a savage mountain that tries to kill you." Ever since, K2 has been called the Savage Mountain. The nickname stuck because it turned out to be accurate. The first to reach the summit were the Italians Lino Lazzardelli and Achille Compagnoni on the 31st of July, 1954. In winter, K2 was conquered only in 2021. It remained the last unclimbed 8,000er in the cold season. In the entire history of climbing, the summit has been reached roughly 960 times. For comparison, Everest has seen more than 13,000 ascents. And on K2, between 92 and 96 people have died. The death rate is 9.5%. On Everest, it is 1 or 2. Before the year 2000, the arithmetic was even simpler. Out of every 4 people who reached the top, 1 never came back. The climbing season runs from June to August. The weather window is 2 to 4 weeks, and only if you are lucky. The weather in the Karakoram is worse and more unpredictable than in the Himalayas. 3/4 of all ascents go by the Abruzzi route, the southeast spur. That is the route we are going to take now. There is nothing gentle on K2. No sections where you can relax, catch your breath, feel safe for a moment. The mountain is steep from base to summit, and every part of it is dangerous in its own way. To reach K2 base camp, you have to walk 63 kilometers on foot along the Baltoro Glacier, one of the longest glaciers outside the polar regions. 8 to 10 days from the nearest town, Skardu, with a caravan of porters across moraines, glacial rivers, and passes. To get to Everest, you fly by helicopter to Lukla and walk for a week through inhabited villages with tea houses. To K2, it is 10 days across rock and ice, without a single settlement along the way. Base camp sits on the Godwin-Austen Glacier at 5,135 meters, 1 to 200 people in a good season. No clinic, no internet. The nearest hospital is 10 days back the way you came. The helicopter works at the edge of its altitude ceiling, and until 2025, a single flight costs $26,000. On Everest, if something goes wrong, help is possible. Here, you are alone. The first thing a climber sees near base camp is not the tents and not the mountain. He sees the Gilkey Memorial, a stone cairn on a rocky outcrop covered in metal plates. On each one, a name, a date, sometimes a few words hammered into aluminum before someone left the mountain. The memorial is named after Art Gilkey, an American geologist who died here in 1953. We will come back to him. For now, the climber stands in front of the cairn and reads the names of those who walked this same route and never returned. The glacier beneath the camp is moving, slowly but relentlessly. In 1939, the American Dudley Wolfe was stranded at 7,900 meters. 3 Sherpas went up to bring him down. All 4 disappeared. In 2002, 64 years later, his remains were found at the foot of the mountain, along with a mitten with his name stitched on it. The glacier had carried them 2.5 kilometers down. On this mountain, even those who do not come back do not stay where they fell, but the living keep going up. From base camp to the start of the Abruzzi Spur, you cross the glacier to advanced base camp. From there, the real climb begins, and K2 makes it clear right away that this is going to be a different kind of conversation. The first 1,000 meters are scree slopes, loose rock, unstable stones, and everything that climbers dislodge from above comes falling down. A helmet is mandatory from the first step. This is not a formality. In 2025, both of the climbers who died during the entire season on K2 were killed by rockfall on exactly this stretch, below Camp 1. One of them was a Pakistani high-altitude porter, Iftikhar Hussain Sadpara. The other was the Chinese climber Jing Guan, who had already successfully reached the summit and died on the way back, when the worst, it seemed, was behind her. Camp 1 stands on open ground. It is windy and cold, but relatively safe from avalanches. From there on, the mountain starts checking whether you actually know how to climb. Between Camp 1 and Camp 2, you meet the house's chimney, 30 to 50 meters of an almost vertical rock crack, named after the American Bill House, who was the first to climb it in 1938. Grade 5.6 on free climbing. Today, the chimney is draped in a cobweb of old ropes that have accumulated over decades of expeditions. One Polish climber joked that if you stretch them all out, they would be long enough to wrap around the base of the mountain. But even with those old ropes, the chimney remains a serious obstacle. For inexperienced climbers, it is impassable, and for some of them, it becomes their personal summit. They will not go any higher. K2, unlike Everest, does not let you buy a permit and walk to the top without skill. The mountain decides who gets through. Above Camp 2 begins the part that strong climbers come to K2 for, and the part that kills those who overestimated themselves, the Black Pyramid. 400 meters of vertical and near-vertical climbing on mixed terrain, rock, ice, and unstable slabs of snow. A difficulty grade from high 4 to middle 5, at 7,000 meters of altitude. This is the technical crux of the entire Abruzzi route. You need years of rock climbing experience, and you need them at an altitude where every single movement is twice as hard as it is at sea level. Rockfall in the Black Pyramid is not a matter of chance. It is a permanent condition. In 1986, the Pakistani Sirdar Muhammad Ali, working for a Korean expedition, was killed by a falling rock right on the route. Climbers passing through the pyramid hide spare gear in it: tents, sleeping bags, stoves. Not out of caution, but out of experience. Camp 3, which sits at the top of the pyramid, is regularly swept away by avalanches. Whoever climbs up and finds a flat field of snow where the camp used to be needs the option to descend and wait it out. Above the Black Pyramid, the character of the mountain changes again. The shoulder, a wide, relatively gentle ridge covered in ice and snow. After the verticals of the pyramid, it looks almost welcoming. This is a deception. The climb along the shoulder has no fixed ropes. The slope is too wide and too gentle for them to be set. But climbers describe a feeling that turns your blood cold. Whole layers of snow under your boots suddenly settle, dropping a few centimeters. It means the layer is ready to break loose. If a section of the shoulder collapses, it will not be rockfall, and it will not be a serac fall. It will be an avalanche on a scale where no rope, no anchor, nothing will help. Here, all you can do is walk fast and hope. Camp 4, from 7,600 to 7,900 meters, depending on conditions. It is pitched as high as possible to shorten the summit day. The death zone begins. From here to the top is 16 to 22 hours of climbing. You leave between 10 at night and 1 in the morning, into the dark, into the cold, upward. On these stretches, K2 takes people one by one. A rock, a slip, a crevasse, a single small avalanche. This is not mass disaster. These are quiet, pinpoint losses that never make the front pages of the world's newspapers. The big tragedy waits higher up, in one specific place which cannot be bypassed and through which you must pass twice, up and back. At 8,200 meters, the Abruzzi route runs into a narrow couloir. Roughly 100 meters long, at a steepness of 50 to 60 degrees, packed snow and ice underfoot. This is the Bottleneck, the neck of the K2 bottle. From here, it is 400 vertical meters to the summit. It feels as if you are almost there, but this is exactly where the majority of the deaths on the mountain are concentrated. The reason is above your head. Directly over the couloir hangs a giant ice serac, a wall of frozen water about 100 meters tall. It is not static. It is alive. Cracks creep across it. Chunks break off and fall, sometimes the size of a car, sometimes the size of a house. There is no warning, no sound, no sign, no time. The serac collapses when it collapses, and whatever is beneath it ceases to exist. The climber comes through the couloir and moves on to the traverse, roughly 100 meters of horizontal travel directly underneath this wall. Above your head, ice. Under your feet, a slope dropping away for thousands of meters. To your right, the wall of the serac, hanging over you like an awning. You walk under it, clipped to a thin fixed rope, and you know the rope will not save you if anything at all comes down from above. You just walk, as fast as you can at this altitude, where every step is an effort, and every breath gives you a third of what your lungs get at sea level. According to summit statistics, 13 of the last 14 deaths on K2 happened in the bottleneck zone or very close to it. At least 10 people died directly inside the couloir. This is the deadliest stretch on any 8,000er in the world, not by absolute numbers, but by concentration of death per meter of route. Going around the bottleneck is, in practice, impossible. In theory, there is a path on the rocks to the left of the couloir, but it is so technically difficult that in the entire history, it has been climbed exactly once, by the American Fritz Wiesner and the Sherpa Pasang Dawa Lama in 1939. Since then, no one. Everyone else goes through the couloir, under the serac, across the traverse, up, and then, if you are lucky, back the same way. That is the architecture of the trap. On other mountains, the most dangerous sections can be bypassed, waded out, secured. Here, they cannot. The bottleneck is the only gate between Camp 4 and the summit. To go up, you pass through it. To come back down, you pass through it again. And both times, the serac above your head may decide that now is its moment. The summer of 2008 on K2 was agony. All of June, all of July, bad weather, wind, snow, zero visibility. Expeditions sat in base camp for weeks, burning time, money, and nerves. Not a single team was able to even attempt a summit push. Some left and went home. Those who stayed were waiting for one thing only, a weather window. On the 31st of July, it opened. The forecast gave one day, two at most, of relatively calm weather. That was supposed to be enough. Several international teams, Norwegian, Dutch, Korean, Serbian, French, American, agreed to coordinate the summit push. 18 people left Camp 4 at night, in rope teams and alone, in the light of their headlamps. The first problem showed up before dawn. The teams that were supposed to have set the fixed ropes through the bottleneck in advance had not done the job in time. The ropes had been anchored wrong, in the wrong places, at the wrong height. Part of the route through the couloir had no fixed line at all. That meant a delay. At 8,200 meters in the death zone, where every extra hour cuts your chances of coming back, 18 people stood waiting while the ropes were re-rigged. On the morning of the 1st of August, as the teams began climbing up through the bottleneck, the Serbian climber Dren Mandika unclipped from the fixed line. According to one version, to fix a broken oxygen system. According to another, to let a Norwegian climber pass him. He lost his balance and fell. The fall was more than 100 meters down the couloir toward the south face. When they reached him, he was dead. The news reached the others over the radio. The summit push had not even really begun, and there was already a dead man on the route. And then immediately, a second. The Pakistani high-altitude porter, Jahan Baig, working with the French expedition, tried to lower Mandik's body down toward Camp 4. But at this altitude, even a living man can barely move his legs. Baig had been behaving strangely. Other climbers had noticed it even before the incident. In all likelihood, hypoxia had already begun affecting his brain. He fell. He did not try to self-arrest, did not drive in his ice axe. He just went down, dead. 2 bodies. Morning. The summit push had not officially started. 18 people had become 16. And those 16, standing at the bottleneck, now had to make a decision, continue or turn back. They continued, all of them. Pemba Gyalje Sherpa, one of the survivors, would later say a line that became the epitaph for that day. If everyone had turned back after the Serbian died, One man would have died, not 11. 16 people continued upward, through the Bottleneck, across the traverse under the serac, up the slopes of the summit pyramid. The delay with the ropes and the deaths of Mandik and Baig had pushed the schedule back by several hours. That meant one thing: even those who moved fast would reach the summit toward evening, and those who moved slowly would be there already in the dark. Between 6 o'clock and 6:15 in the evening, the last climbers step onto the highest point of K2, 8,611 meters. The sky is already darkening. The temperature is dropping. Ahead of them lies a night descent through the entire route they climbed during the day. Across the traverse, through the Bottleneck, under the serac. The first collapse happens as the group begins the descent. A piece of the serac, huge, unpredictable, unstoppable, breaks off the ice wall and crashes into the couloir. It sweeps away everything that had been fixed in the Bottleneck: ropes, ice screws, anchor stations. Everything that a climber might have held onto during the descent ceases to exist in a matter of seconds. The couloir they climbed that morning is now bare ice at 60 degrees, without a single point of protection in the dark. Rolf Bay dies in that collapse, 33 years old, Norwegian. Right beside him on the mountain is his wife, the climber, Cecilia Skog. They had climbed together, they had planned to descend together. Now she is alive and he is not. Skog somehow survived the collapse. She will make it down. Later, she will write a book and dedicate it to Rolf. News of the destroyed rope spreads across the radios. Everyone above the Bottleneck is cut off. There is no descent anymore. Not in the sense that it is dangerous. In the sense that it physically does not exist. The ropes are gone, and coming down bare ice at 60 degrees of steepness at night, at 8,200 meters, without a single point of protection, is not a descent, it is a fall. Panic. Some of the climbers decide to try to descend in the dark without ropes. It is a desperate decision, and for some of them, it turns out to be their last. Hugues Dauberade, a French climber, 61 years old, one of the oldest members of the summit push, falls while trying to descend at night above the Bottleneck. His Dutch companion, Cas van de Gevel, meets him on the route. Dauberade is still alive, but he cannot move. Van de Gevel is not in any condition to help him. He descends alone. Dauberade dies on the slope. Karim Meherban, the Pakistani high-altitude porter who had been working with Dauberade, disappears that same night. He was last seen leaving the summit together with the Frenchman. Where and how he died, no one knows. Most likely he was swept away by the second or third collapse of the serac. His body was never found. By the morning of the 2nd of August, 8 people are still alive above the Bottleneck. They have spent the night in the death zone, without shelter, without food, without a way down. The temperature is -40 and colder. Oxygen bottles are running out or already empty. Their minds work worse by the hour. The decisions they make at dawn will determine which of them makes it home. Dawn on the 2nd of August. The sun lights up the upper part of K2, and those who lived through the night begin to move. 8 people on the slope above the Bottleneck. Below them, a couloir with no ropes. Above them, the serac, which has already collapsed during the night and may collapse again at any second. The Dutch climber, Wilco van Rooyen, begins the descent first. He is almost blind. Snow blindness has burned his eyes from the previous day, and he sees the world as a blurred white patch. He moves slowly, by feel, trying to find the route through the Bottleneck from memory. At some point, he wanders off the route and ends up on the other side of the mountain, on the season route. He does not know this. He just keeps going down, because standing still means dying. The Italian Marco Confortola descends along the main route. Below the traverse, he comes upon 3 Korean climbers and their Sherpa guide, Jumik Bahote. All 4 are tangled in ropes and hanging on an ice ledge in unnatural positions. What happened to them during the night, no one knows. Whether they were hit by a serac collapse, fell on their own, or got tangled in the dark, all versions are possible. None are proven. Confortola sees that one of the Koreans is moving, but he has no strength, no gear, no way to pull them out. He walks past. Later, he will say that this decision will haunt him for the rest of his life. The next one down is Ger MacDonald, Irish, 37 years old. The day before, he had become the first citizen of Ireland to reach the summit of K2. He sees the Koreans and Jumik, and he makes a different decision. He stops. Confortola shouts at him that he has to descend, that the serac could fall at any second, that staying here is death. MacDonald does not leave. He begins untangling the ropes, trying to free the hanging men. The third collapse of the serac. The mass of ice tears off the wall, flies across the traverse, and buries the spot where MacDonald was working on the ropes. It sweeps him away. The Irishman who stopped to help when the others walked past dies doing what he believed was right. But the serac is not finished. Sometime later, minutes, maybe an hour, Big Pasang Bhote, a Nepali Sherpa, climbs up from below, from Camp 4. He is going up into the death zone, against logic, against common sense. His cousin Jumik Bhote is one of the men hanging in the ropes. Pasang reaches the ledge and radios down that he has found Jumik and 2 of the Koreans. The 4th collapse. The serac falls again. Pasang Bhote, Jumik Bhote, and the 3 Korean climbers, Kim Hyo-gyong, Park Kyung-hyo, and Hwang Dong-jin, all 5 die. The man who climbed up to save his brother dies next to him. By the middle of the day on the 2nd of August, the serac had collapsed at least 4 times in 18 hours. Each time, it took people with it. Out of the 18 who set off for the summit, 11 are dead. 7 survivors descend by different paths, some alone, some half delirious, some carrying another on their back. Van Rooyen, blinded and wandering onto a route that was not his, spends 2 days on the mountain above 8,000 meters. He is found through the GPS coordinates of a satellite phone. He called his brother in the Netherlands, and his brother passed the data on to the rescuers. On the 4th of August, Pakistani military helicopters evacuate him and Konfratola from base camp to Skardu. The bodies of the 11 dead stayed on the mountain. Not one of them was evacuated. K2 does not give up its own, and this time was no different. After the disaster of 2008, the world talked about it as something unprecedented. But those who knew K2 were not surprised. The mountain had done this before, and it would do it again. The summit of K2 is not the finish line. To get back, you have to go through the Bottleneck again. The same 50 to 60 degrees, the same serac. Only now the climber is burned out. 16 to 22 hours of ascent have destroyed his muscles, his oxygen, his coordination. On Everest, after the South Col, the slope is relatively gentle. You can trudge down almost on autopilot. On K2 you cannot. There is not a single gentle stretch here. The descent demands the same technique as the ascent, except the climber no longer has it in him. Cheering Dorje Sherpa was one of the very few who made it down that night in 2008. He went through the Bottleneck in total darkness, without ropes, with another man tied to him who had no ice axe. On a 60-degree slope, at 8,200 meters, he carried double his own weight. Ed V.S. Stores would later write, "If Pasang had fallen, he would have pulled Cheering with him. One of the most incredible descents in the history of mountaineering, and it was forced on him. But 2008 is not an anomaly, it is the rule. In 1986, the Black Summer, 7 climbers reached the summit and got caught in a storm that did not let up for 5 days. Camp 4, 8,000 meters. Wind at 160 kilometers per hour. Food ran out on the 2nd day, fuel on the 3rd. Without fuel, there is no water. Without water, the body gives out. Julie Tullis died of pulmonary edema on the 3rd night. Alan Rouse, the first Englishman to reach the summit of K2, was hallucinating, unable to stand, and was left in the tent. When the storm gave a break on the 5th day, those who still had strength began to descend. 2 made it to base camp. In total, the 1986 season took 13 people on K2. 9 years later, the mountain showed that it could kill in another way too, instantly. On the 13th of August, 1995, Alison Hargreaves, 33 years old, reached the summit of K2. 3 months earlier, she had become the first woman to summit Everest without Sherpas and without oxygen. She stood on top of K2 at 6:45 in the evening. Peter Hillary had turned around earlier, having noticed the weather changing. Hargreaves and 6 others kept going. The storm hit during the descent, not a 5-day siege, but an instant strike. All 7 died. Hargreaves was most likely blown off the mountain. Her body was never found. She left a family behind. Her son Tom Ballard followed the same path and became a remarkable climber. He was the first to solo all 6 great north faces of the Alps in a single winter. On the 24th of February 2019, he died on Nanga Parbat. 24 years after his mother, the same fate. The mountains took them both. Every great tragedy on K2 is a story of the descent. The summit is reachable. Coming back is not. But K2 also has another story. Not a story about people walking past the dying, but about people who decided not to walk past. Summer of 1953. The American expedition led by Charles Houston. 8 men, among them Art Gilkey, a 27-year-old geologist from Colorado. At around 7,300 meters, Gilkey begins suffering sharp pains in his leg, blood clots in the deep veins. At this altitude, with severe dehydration, this condition can become fatal within minutes. Gilkey cannot walk. He cannot stand. Descending under his own power is impossible. The team makes a decision that will define the entire expedition. They are going to carry him down. On an improvised stretcher, through a storm, down the wall. Not leave him, carry him. On the 10th of August, during the descent, one of the climbers slips. The rope tightens, jerks the next man, who drags the others with him. Within seconds, 6 men are tumbling down the face, roped together, cartwheeling, picking up speed. Pete Schoening, standing higher up, throws his rope over a rock spur, drives in his ice axe, and takes the force of 6 falling bodies on himself. The rope stretches as tight as steel wire. He holds, 1 man holding 6 on the face of K2. The belay, a rope move that will be dissected in mountaineering textbooks for the next 70 years. All 6 survived, but while the team was recovering, a small avalanche swept the stretcher with Gilkey off the slope and carried him away. His body was not found until 1993, when after 40 years, the glacier pushed his remains to the surface. There is a version that Gilkey untied the ropes himself, having seen his companions nearly die because of him, and deciding not to put them at risk again. It is unlikely. He was tied in too securely, but the story is alive because people want it to be true. Before leaving, the team built a stone cairn and attached the first plaque. That is how the Gilkey Memorial came into being. Jim Curran, a historian of K2, later wrote, "The Houston expedition remains the benchmark for the best in mountaineering, not because they reached the summit, they did not, but because they decided to carry their comrade down, and not one of them ever, not even once, suggested abandoning him." The remains of Art Gilkey were found in 1993, 40 years after his death. The glacier pushed them to the surface, the way it pushed out the remains of Dudley Wolfe, and the way it will someday push out those K2 took in 2008. The mountain does not give up its bodies right away. It grinds them, moves them, hides them in crevasses and ice falls, and then, after decades, it throws them back up at its own foot, next to the cairn that their comrades once built. In 70-something years, the cairn has gathered plaques the way a tree gathers rings. On some of them are neat, factory-cut letters brought by families from Europe, America, Asia. On others, crooked letters hammered with a nail into an aluminum plate from camp cookware, written by companions right there on the rocks, before they went back down the Baltoro and never returned. There are plaques in English, in Urdu, in Korean, in Polish. There are those that carry only a name and a date, and there are those that carry a single sentence that stops your breath. Between 92 and 96 people have died on K2. The bodies of most of them have never been found. On Everest, the dead lie along the route, frozen into the ice, visible, sometimes turned into landmarks. On K2, it is different. The steepness of the slopes and the avalanches carry the bodies down into gorges, into crevasses, under glaciers. K2 does not leave its dead in plain sight. It hides them. Allison Hargreaves' body was never found. The bodies of the 11 who died in 2008 were never evacuated. Alan Rouse's body remained in the tent at 8,000 meters in 1986, and no one ever went back for it. Since 2018, K2 has been undergoing the same transformation that Everest went through 20 years earlier. Commercial expeditions, Nepali operators, fixed ropes from base camp to the summit, bottled oxygen, porters. In 2022, there was a record, about 200 successful ascents in a single season, more than all the years from 1954 to 2000 combined. The death rate dropped from 29% to 9.5%. The numbers look better, the graphs go down. But House's chimney is still vertical, the Black Pyramid is still steep, the serac above the bottleneck still hangs there, the same as it was in 2008, as in 1986, as in 1954. It does not know that there are more people down below now. It does not know that they have better oxygen and more accurate weather forecasts. It just hangs and waits for its time to fall. Every season, new plaques appear on the cairn. They are bolted on, welded on, hammered into the stone. The names keep adding up. And around it, among the rocks and ice, in the cracks between the boulders, on this lifeless, weathered glacial wasteland, flowers grow. Small, thin, impossible. The only ones for tens of kilometers around. No one planted them. No one waters them. They just are, among the plaques with the names of the dead, at the foot of a mountain that remains the most dangerous on Earth.